when Vhagar exploded Lucerys Velaryon and his dragon Arrax into a bunch of small prince nuggets, who actually is to blame? In my last video, I took that question from the perspective of the politics and relationships between the Baratheons, Targaryens, Velaryons, and Strongs to what led to Lucerys being left out in the storm to face his destiny. However, as you were watching, you may have wondered, why didn't I talk at all about how Lucerys was killed and the dance of the dragons that took place over Storm's End? Roll credits. Let's do that. It seems pretty straightforward, right? Aemond chased Luke, Vhagar gave him the old chomp chomp, and that's kinda it. It wasn't a simple event though, as there wasn't just Luke running from Aemond in terror, there was also Vhagar and Arrax interacting with each other while also trying to follow the commands of their riders, and also how each rider influenced their dragons through their behaviors, emotions, and the mystical dragonbond. The question instead becomes, what contributed the most to the abrupt end of Arrax and Lucerys Velaryon? Earlier in House of the Dragons Season 1, King Viserys said, "The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. Their power man should have never trifled with." Trifle we shall, though, and talk about if Viserys is right and the Targaryens barely control their dragons, or maybe they exercise a lot more control over the winged beasts than most of their riders even realize. To start off with, let's go over the events of the Waltzing Wyverns. Aemond commands Luke to cut out his eye in payment for his own. When denied, Aemond advances on Luke in anger, picking up the knife. Boros throws them both out into the storm. Why did he do that? See previous video here. Aemond takes off before Luke does on Vhagar, showing he sprinted to get to his dragon first, intending to chase them down like prey. Luke tries to calm down Arrax, who is very nervous about the now missing Vhagar, but kinda more talking to himself. Flying into the storm, Vhagar can't be seen anywhere, but Luke and Arrax can hear her. The shadows in the clouds above show Aemond and Vhagar stalking the two through the clouds. Suddenly, Vhagar appears in front of them, almost trying to scare them. Can tell because Vhagar's jaws aren't open and also veers off to miss them and doesn't really kick or even slap them with her tail. A very scary hello. Aemond's laughter in the clouds confirms that he's really just messing with them at this point. You know, dragon pranks. Vhagar reappears behind Arrax and bites at the air a few times, swings her claws at Luke and Arrax, but not really trying for the kill here. Aemond is chasing Luke here to terrify the boy, although his intentions are violent like he said in Storm's End. He's not really going for the kill. For instance, he's not ordering Vhagar to breathe fire, and Vhagar is faster than Arrax as we've already seen, but she's holding behind Arrax and taking these false swipes. A bit like that trope we hear about all the time, where someone is waving a gun at somebody just to scare them, except, with a dragon. Arrax and Luke dive into a cavern just above the waterline, a bit too small for Vhagar and possibly an X-Wing, and seemingly get away at last. Aemond, realizing he's been had, yells for Luke and High Valyrian, saying he owes him a debt. He's looking for Luke, but he seems pretty satisfied that he scared the crap out of Luke. However, out of nowhere, Arrax attacks Vhagar, breathing fire into the Elder Dragon's face. We hear Luke yelling, "No," and "Serve me," confirming that he didn't command Arrax to do this. Vhagar is understandably pissed at getting fire in her eyes. Aemond is also very surprised and instantly worried about what's about to happen. He starts yelling no over and over, trying to calm down Vhagar. Meanwhile, Vhagar is ignoring his commands and starts chasing after Arrax out of control. Weirdly, Aemond is yelling his commands in the common tongue, not High Valyrian, probably a choice for the audience, but unclear if his dragon actually responds to commands in the common tongue. Previously, we've seen them respond to commands given in High Valyrian, either from the riders themselves or the dragon keepers. Arrax escapes through the cloud layer, erupting into the sunlight. The danger is over, right? Then Vhagar appears out of nowhere and devours the rider and dragon in one bite. Aemond continues to yell no, looks back at the bodies of Luke and Arrax tumbling to the water, distraught, surprised, and shocked. He looks at Vhagar with a look on his face that says, "Oh fuck, what have I done?" With the sequence of events out of the way, first up, let's rap a bit about Aemond's reaction in the moments after Arrax's attack and Vhagar's finishing move. You can see a clear difference when Aemond feels in control versus when he has lost it. Aemond here is blatantly trying to scare Luke, make him feel helpless and small at his mercy. The way he's holding Vhagar back, laughing, not commanding or urging Vhagar to actually go for the kill. Vhagar bites the air menacingly, then veers off. Her claws shoot out and grasp nothing but air. She's not breathing fire either. She's pulling her punches draconically, if that's a word. We know Vhagar is faster than Arrax and surprisingly agile despite being a flying battleship, as she overtakes the smaller dragon easily in the clouds and then appears in front of Arrax suddenly. If Vhagar really was trying to kill Arrax from the beginning of the chase, the baby dragon wouldn't have survived the first jump scare. To Aemond, this is a game, although an extremely dangerous and reckless one. So with that in mind, let's take a peek at the look on his face when Arrax and Luke seemingly have gotten away. Aemond is frustrated, but also satisfied that he got what he wanted. Luke ran like a coward back to his mommy and Aemond feels so strong. Mission accomplished. In previous episodes, Aemond has been trying to do this a fair amount, particularly at the dinner scene when Daemon and Aemond, that is a tongue twister, stood toe-to-toe after his insults and short fight. Daemon is not scared of Aemond, and Aemond knows it. Aemond then slinks off annoyed that he's not taken seriously like Daemon is as a threat. However, the desire to be is there. And we know he looks up to and wants to be like Daemon. The look on Aemond's face when Daemon cuts off the head of Vaemond in front of the whole court is highly instructive. That's who he wants to be, who he admires. Spoiler, Aemond does not want to be like Viserys the Peaceful, his father. He wants to be dangerous. Look back at Aemond's incessant training with weapons, his behavior around Luke and Jace when they arrive in King's Landing. He's challenging them and being a bully. It's the same here as before. He's an edgelord enjoying feeling powerful against someone who hurt him. As a child, those two boys, and in particular Luke, made him feel weak, and now he wants them to feel the same way. And of course, this is highly targeted on Luke, as he is the one who took out Aemond's eye with his knife. In this fight, Aemond is biggest and strongest, yet still loses because it's 4v1, some pocket sand, and a surprise dagger. He decided to make himself even stronger, more dangerous, able to kill so he won't be beaten ever again. He will not be surprised again by someone he underestimates. He will be prepared next time someone comes at him with a knife. Although he says at the time that his eye is a worthy price to pay for something like Vhagar, his behavior tells us that he does not truly believe that in his soul. He's not good with Vhagar for an eye. Every day he puts on that patch and is reminded of being maimed, he feels hurt and weak and vulnerable. Then he trains a little harder and he nurtures that rage. And it all erupts at Storm's End when Luke is finally vulnerable, no longer protected by his mother or uncle. Although Aemond is mostly screwing around here, we can see exactly when the situation changed from being a very dangerous game to an actual attack. When Arrax flies out of the storm, out of Luke's control, and breathes fire into Vhagar's face. It's instructive that we hear in voiceover as well that Luke is yelling at Arrax to stop, to serve him, and Aemond hears it too. This is a mistake by Arrax, a baby dragon who's out of control with fear at Vhagar's intimidation. Aemond immediately starts yelling at Vhagar to serve him as well, to calm down, no, stop, don't, as she roars in rage and takes off after Arrax anyway. From this, we can see that no, Aemond did not consciously want Vhagar to kill Luke and Arrax during all this chasing. The intent was bullying, to make Luke fear Aemond and what he could do if he really wanted to. Aemond's look of astonishment at the end says it all. He instantly regrets how far this has gone as Vhagar decides that the game has come to an end. In that way, we can see this not as Vhagar killing Luke, but Vhagar killing Arrax. Arrax breathed fire into the Elder Dragon's eyes. Arrax is the one who hurt her. So when Vhagar wraps her jaws around the pair, she's probably not thinking, yeah, screw Luke, I hate that guy, I'm gonna eat him, as far as dragons think, I guess. It's a lot closer to, I'm gonna kill the little shit that breathed fire in my face right now. And that there is a person on Arrax's back isn't really a part of the equation, it just doesn't come up. But let's examine this closer beyond Vhagar throwing a tantrum that Aemond couldn't rein in. Viserys earlier on the season makes the claim that it is an illusion that they control the dragons. They're a power no man should have trifled with. And looking at how Vhagar ignored Aemond to kill Arrax and Luke, seemingly right. The bond between man and dragon is not one of absolute control. Aemond said stop over and over and over again. Vhagar said go, and Vhagar's desire won. But there's a little bit more to this. The dragons themselves are intelligent. Okay, not a ton about dog intelligence, but they do think for themselves. They act on their own most of their time. They can be trained, as we see in the dragon pit, even though this itself is a bit of an illusion. We see that they could escape at any time and kill their trainers if they really wanted to, and are under heavy restraints most of the time with thick chains and locks. Such things are not necessary for an animal you have under control. See, the wild dragons, the cannibal, grey ghost, and sheep stealer, they can and do live on their own without humans and don't really appreciate it when they come around, as well as the currently riderless dragons Silverwing and Vermithor, who live as they please on Dragonstone despite spending decades with their own riders. The dragons do not need humans. They choose to sometimes listen to them. Even with someone like Daenerys, who raised her dragons from birth and treats them as her own children, struggles many times with the willful beasts, going so far as to lock them in the pit of marine when she couldn't make them obey, and Drogon threw a draconic tantrum in the Great Grass Sea saying, "Screw you, Mom, I don't need you." So how do the Targaryens control them at all? Part of it is sort of normal animal training. Positive and negative reinforcement goes a long way, even when dealing with flying nuclear bombs. Many dragon riders were known to use their whips and switches on their dragons to extract obedience. And yes, even Daenerys, she used a slaver's whip on Drogon in the fighting pits when he tried to attack her in the books. They also use food control to get the dragons to see the riders and keepers as authority figures. House of the Dragon showed us the scene with Jace and his dragon Vermax, as the dragon keepers get Jace to feed the dragon and reinforce his role as master. However, there is something else at play, something deep and magical and confusing and entirely Martin. Something called the dragonbond. Buckle up for a delve into the world of George R.R. Martin's very strange ideas of magic. We're familiar in Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire of skin changing or warging, where a magical person's eyes turn white and they take control of an animal, or person if you're Bran Stark, hold the door and all that. The skin changer's body becomes immobile while they take control of their target, moving the victim as if they were some kind of remote robot. This is a thing George likes writing about a lot in different forms in his other works. His favorite form of fantasy powers are consistently psychics and telekinetics. These powers are featured in The Short List, A Song for Leah, Sand Kings, Tough Voyaging, The Pear-Shaped Man, Night Flyers, and 7 Times Never Kill Man, Meat House Man, Nobody Leaves New Pittsburgh, The Ice Dragon, among many, many others. It's pervasive and a common fantasy of Martin's no matter the setting or genre. Of the myriad psychic examples, the one most closely borrowed from with the dragonbond is what's called a familiar. The animal and person maintain a psychic connection between themselves, hearing each other's thoughts and desires. Evelyn Tough does this with his psychic cats in the series Tough Voyaging, where he doesn't exactly command them, but they do what he wants most of the time without direct control like skin changing and warging. They can hold psychic conversations between themselves with Tough, using the cats to tell him what other people are thinking. Of course, George did not make this up. The idea of familiars is a long-running theme of myths and legends, most commonly associated with spirits that were bonded to witches and sometimes other magical beings. As with George's example, they are commonly depicted as black cats in entertainment, although typically it doesn't have to be any particular animal, just some sort of magical being. George has confirmed this in the past, saying that the dragonbond is a milder but different form of the power of skin changing. The dragon riders not totally dominate the will of the dragon, nor go limp while their eyes roll back in their head. Instead, like the example of familiars, they can sense each other's emotions and thoughts, causing the dragons to share their riders' minds and vice versa. This just makes sense logically from observation. The dragons sometimes have reins for the rider, but the rider is often able to get them to perform complicated and precise actions without verbal or physical commands. Think of all the different actions that the one word Dracarys has led to. Actually, you don't have to. I did it for you. Here's a compilation of the many times the command Dracarys has been used in the show and the books. The word itself just means dragonfire. That's all the writer is asking for. And here's what the dragons actually did upon receiving that command. Lay waste to the slavers and destroy large parts of Astapor. Kill Laena Velaryon as she is dying in childbirth. Attack Pyat Pri and destroy the chains. Start burning ships. Burn specifically Randall and Dickon Tarly alive, but not anybody else. Some of this is just simplicity for the sake of TV audiences, but remains the same in the source books, where there's an unspoken understanding of what the rider wants and the dragon obeys. It's like if you taught a dog to sit. Every time you say sit, the dog plops its butt down. But then one time you say it, without any other cues, you want the dog to instead climb a ladder and sit on the roof facing west. You'd be crazy to expect the dog to do that. That's basically what happens with the dragon bond though. The dragons understand and react to an enormous amount of unspoken desires that there's truly no explanation for. Besides that, much of the time they are not being directly commanded to do anything verbally, and yet the dragons obey the whim of their rider. Although we know that some more fine control can come from subtle commands, like you see with horses and riders, where the rider can squeeze their legs, change their position, use their balance, whips, and reins if the dragons have them to get them to move a little bit. Possibly some amount of training. The display of Daemon and his late wife Laena shows that the dragons can seemingly be taught some amount of routines. Even still, that cannot account for all the things the dragons do compared to what prompts they get from the rider. The dragonbond is what makes up the gap in between those. More than just commands though, there's some illuminating examples of bizarre dragon behavior that really show the depth of possibility that the dragonbond allows between the rider and mount. For example, do you remember that time Drogon got drunk on Shade of the Evening despite not touching a drop? I've talked about it in several streams previously. One of my favorite demonstrations of Dany and Drogon's psychic powers is in the House of the Undying when she is given the Shade of the Evening by the Warlocks of Qarth. The book version of the sequence is far stranger than the show one, in particular that at the beginning of her journey through the building, she is given a strange tasting liquid to drink. Drogon noticeably doesn't have any himself, and this is important to what happens next. Afterwards, Dany starts hallucinating wildly from the Shade of the Evening. She sees visions in doorways, hears piping sounds of chaos, ghosts of the past, and even seeing the future like the Red Wedding. What's odd about this is it's not just Dany who is reacting. Drogon is acting odd too. He's struggling to fly, he's crashing into the floor like the freshmen on their first drink. He can seemingly see and hear everything Dany is at the same time.
Along the right hand was a row of torches burning with a smoky orange light, but the only doors were to her left. Drogon unfolded wide black wings and beat the stale air. He flew 20 feet before thudding to an undignified crash. Dany strode after him. Dany could hear sounds within the walls, a faint scurrying and scrabbling that made her think of rats. Drogon heard them too.
When Dany is escaping after attacking the Undying, we see that much of what she previously experienced was never there. The doors are gone, the visions, the noises, even architecture. So how did Drogon see and hear everything that she did? The dragonbond is responsible, amplified wildly by the powers of the Shade of the Evening. And next we have the other Dragon Queen, Rhaenyra and her dragon Syrax, just in case you thought this was a Daenerys-only thing, which honestly does sometimes happen, looking at you immune to fire powers. Rhaenyra has also had visions and psychic connections with her dragon, Syrax, that show the dragonbond. One scene is when Rhaenyra is having her miscarriage on Dragonstone. As this is happening and she is screaming in pain, the show suddenly cuts to Syrax. The dragon is roaring as well, in concert with Rhaenyra, and they keep cutting back and forth between the two, visually implying that this is really happening and happening right now. Syrax, elsewhere on Dragonstone, is experiencing the pain and strong emotions that Rhaenyra is and acting them out. Given that the show is not inside the characters' heads like the books are, it can be difficult to show visually how they experience the dragonbond and warging. With Bran Stark, Game of Thrones used a visual shorthand for his visions where they would flash a whole bunch of images on the screen really fast. And that seems to be the shorthand that is being drawn on here for Rhaenyra, to imply the mystical, magical dragon bond between herself and Syrax is activating. But this also tells us something else very important. The dragons feel what their riders does and become overwhelmed by those emotions. Taking this from Syrax's perspective, the dragon probably doesn't understand what Rhaenyra is even feeling, as they lay eggs rather than give birth. The dragon doesn't know why it's in pain, but the experience is invading the dragon's mind, and the only thing it can do is roar and scream as well. A much subtler example of this is on the Dragonstone Causeway, where Rhaenyra is receiving Otto Hightower's demands for her surrender to her half-brother Aegon, and engage in diplomacy over threats of violence. However, as the conversation goes on, Rhaenyra gets angrier and more agitated at what she's hearing and the coup done against her, as her tempers flare for Syrax threatening them. The interesting part of this is that Rhaenyra is also very surprised that she didn't command or expect her dragon to do this. Instead, we see Syrax responding to her temper rising and the desire she is fighting to have the traitor's hand and his men executed for their treason. Syrax acts on it though, ignoring the conscious efforts Rhaenyra is making and making her desires a reality like some kind of dragon anger translator. And not just Dany and Rhaenyra either, Daemon displays this level of bond with Caraxes, often doing exactly what Daemon wants without even a word. Daemon's scene on the causeway after he stole the dragon egg is probably the biggest one. Daemon and Otto are facing off against each other, and Daemon is becoming angrier and angrier, rising to threatening violence. He draws his sword on Otto and his men, and in response, from hundreds or thousands of feet away behind the Dragonstone curtain wall, Caraxes unexpectedly climbs over, threatening the men exactly the same as Daemon. And Daemon's reaction, unlike Rhaenyra, is not one of surprise. He seems to have expected Caraxes to do this. It's like the dragon knows what Daemon wants as if by magic. And you know what? It is magic in a sense. Psychic dragon magic. A similar example on Dragonstone is when Daemon is questioning the members of the Kingsguard of their loyalty to Rhaenyra. Much like with Dany and Drogon, again we see Caraxes responding to Daemon's emotion, even punctuating his sentences like a personal hype man. We can see what Daemon is doing. He has issued no commands, he's not speaking in High Valyrian, he's not using body language to tell Caraxes that this is the moment to roar to make his sentence sound better and his threat more real. The dragon just knows this is what Daemon wants and does it because their minds are apparently very close to being one and the same. Their dragon bond is incredibly strong. And another example is when Daemon is attacking the Triarchy with Caraxes. During the fight, Daemon is shot by an arrow. As this happens, the dragon instantly roars out in pain like it was the one that got shot, and yet the dragon is reacting like it was itself. There's no reason for the dragon to do that unless the bond between them is so strong that in that moment that Daemon's pain and anger is invading Caraxes' mind like Rhaenyra's did with Syrax during her birthing. In a much more mild example, the normally ferocious and violent Caraxes instead acts like a cute puppy when Daemon shows his dragon to Mysaria, even inviting her to pet the dragon. Instead of being put off by the contact and this strange person, clearly the affection Daemon has for Mysaria translates and the dragon acts positively docile. Otherwise, Caraxes is known for being exactly as savage and bloodthirsty as Daemon, with his former rider Prince Aemond remarking, "He loves to burn." Not a dragon you really want to give a pet to, but because of Daemon, Mysaria is allowed to. Another example I previously discussed was Vhagar and her former rider Laena. While in Essos, the married couple has devised a sort of dragon air show to show off their command of their dragons and entertain their hosts. The pair fly in formation, Vhagar breathes fire while Caraxes emerges through it, then they do some Top Gun style buzz in the tower. Despite the precision of what they're doing, the only command issued during this entire 3D air show is just Dracarys. And yet both dragons know what they're doing. And there is the unfortunate second example, Laena's suicide by dragonfire. As she is about to die in childbirth from a miscarriage, Laena runs outside to her dragon and commands it to breathe fire. However, Vhagar refuses at first. Why would Vhagar refuse to breathe fire in that moment? It could just turn its head and breathe fire into the air. The reason is because the dragon understands that Laena isn't saying, "Hey, can you just breathe some fire into the air? I'm a little cold." She's saying she wants Vhagar to kill her. And Vhagar's understanding and affection for Laena is paramount. We see after Laena's death that Vhagar follows her body across the narrow sea and seemingly pouts in the sands for her loss. But how does Vhagar know that's what Laena wants? Again, it's the dragon bond which the show put on display with their acrobatics previously. An unspoken understanding passes between rider and dragon, and we can see that Vhagar takes some convincing, although in the end, she does obey the unspoken command and kills Laena. Which, by the way, given previous examples, means that Vhagar very likely felt the pain of burning alive as she was burning Laena. The exact same as Caraxes feeling Daemon's pain when he got shot in the shoulder, and very likely Drogon when Dany was stabbed as it is happening, making all of these events far more tragic and painful for the dragons. Side note, this is something Game of Thrones should have played up a lot more, particularly with the deaths of Viserion and Rhaegal for Dany, that their deaths weren't just emotional blows of a mother losing her children, but very possibly she felt them dying and experienced the cold hand of death itself. Twice. And I want to take a moment and talk about the infamous burning of the Iron Throne scene after Dany's assassination by Jon. As soon as Dany is stabbed, Drogon roars and flies to see what is happening to his mother. As with previous examples, there's no visual or auditory clues for Drogon to know that something has happened. The dragon bond is what's causing him to investigate. He felt her pain, he felt the dagger going into her chest, her life slipping away, and rushed to her side as anyone would for someone they love. There's a whole bunch of memes about what happened next, where Drogon almost kills Jon and instead melts the Iron Throne in dragonfire before collecting Dany's corpse and flying away. The two memes that emerged were ones that made him either incredibly smart or incredibly dumb. One understanding the significance of the Iron Throne to Dany and how it is actually the throne that killed her via ambition, the other for attacking the pointy thing. While both are ridiculous and meant to be funny, the first is actually probably closer to the truth in that Drogon can feel Dany's emotions and her final thoughts before death. Maybe she was thinking about the house with the red door and how her desire for the Iron Throne turned her into who she is in her last moments. What life she would have had if she'd never heard of this pointy chair, if she didn't know she was a Targaryen. Perhaps there were some confused emotions lingering from Dany between love and betrayal that caused Drogon to relent roasting the King of the North to cinders. Or even that whatever part of her soul was left stopped Drogon. Second lives are a thing in this universe after all. It's entirely possible that Dany lived on in some form in Drogon. Second lives, as they're called in this universe, where after a skin changer dies, they can leave their body and live on in an animal. And there's no reason to think that this couldn't happen as well with dragons and riders. It would actually be really cool if it were true. Imagine if Balerion wasn't just Balerion the Black Dread, but also his previous riders, Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel, Princess Araya. Boy, it would have been cool if the show made the dragonbond more of a thing, so what happened was able to be better understood at the time, instead of, oh, I don't know, a dork several years later with lots of notes and examples to detail it for them, to piece together what was actually happening with their own characters instead of being understood at the time. And one last example to get back on track for the video. Many fans hated the scene where Rhaenys burst through the floor with Meleys and killed a whole bunch of people to intimidate the Greens in their moment of triumph. However, as an example of the dragonbond, it is highly instructive. At no point do we hear Rhaenys telling Meleys to do anything. And yet Meleys roars at the Greens as a warning, being fueled by Rhaenys' aggression, and then her restraint as the dragon turns and runs out the door and flies when Rhaenys realizes she's being trapped. This entire sequence, Rhaenys is silent and her dragon still does everything she wants. A testament to the control the queen who never was has over Meleys, very similar to Daemon. She was in total control of her dragon like a true master. They don't need to speak commands or pull back on reins or dig in with their heels or hit them with a switch. The dragon and rider become almost one. However, the opposite is just as true. If the dragon bond is weak or recent, or the rider is intimidated by the dragon, then the dragon seems less willing to listen to the connection the two are making. Just for example, we've seen several times that dragons not only need to respect their rider, but they also have this Targaryen gene sniffing behavior. We saw it with both Jon Snow and Aemond, where their new dragons sniffed them at first, as if confirming they can smell the Valyrianness, and then also put them through a series of tests to see if they are worthy of riding them. Drogon and Daenerys at the end of A Dance with Dragons appear to be going through a similar thing where Dany has to earn Drogon's respect. There are also the aforementioned wild dragons on Dragonstone that Daemon wants to find riders for, and we're going to get to see firsthand what happens when a dragon doesn't care for a potential rider. Previously, no known Targaryen has ever been harmed by a dragon they are attempting to tame. That might change very quickly, kind of like Ash Ketchum and Charizard, where he had to get enough gym badges to earn Charizard's respect before they could go on to be the very best like no one ever was. So getting back to Aemond and Luke in particular, sorting through all this information we've been given about the dragon bond and how dragons react to strong emotions from their riders, it is unfair to say that Vhagar acted alone in killing Arrax and Luke after getting some fire thrown in her face. Aemond was boiling over with rage and violence and the intent to severely maim and harm Luke since they were in Storm's End and afterwards during the chase through the storm itself. Much like Rhaenyra and Syrax on the Causeway, Aemond consciously knows that he should not really want to hurt Luke here, but subconsciously, his savagery is on full display. He really wants to. His instinct, his rage at the memory of losing his eye is driving him and Vhagar. Vhagar is mimicking the behavior Aemond is displaying, with the attacking, the chasing, the scaring Luke and Arrax for their lives like Leatherface chasing them with a chainsaw, literally hunting and stalking them like prey. Much the same as we've seen in House of the Dragon, with Syrax and Caraxes acting on the unspoken emotions and desires of their riders, overriding their conscious thoughts. Vhagar is responding to Aemond, having spent the last few years getting her inner storm of hate and rage and desire for violence that Aemond has been constantly feeding her through their bond. So when Arrax fights back, also listening to Luke's fear and lashing out in panic, Vhagar doesn't listen to the conscious thoughts of Aemond about how he knows he can't and he shouldn't and what the political repercussions will be. It's his subconscious, the one that wants to carve out Luke's eye and make the boy pay for his attack. That is what Vhagar continues acting on and does what Aemond wants to do in the deepest, darkest parts of his heart. That Vhagar does act on them is likely a byproduct of the fact that Aemond and Vhagar have been bonded only for a relatively short time. They haven't had decades and experiences that Daemon and Rhaenys have had with their dragons, forging their wills into one that allows them to control the dragons with a thought. Aemond still largely relies on vocal commands and the use of reins to try and get Vhagar to do what he wants. Entirely possible that he doesn't even realize how much Vhagar is listening to his thoughts and emotions versus what he vocalizes. Their bond is new and still developing, unlike Laena and Vhagar, who understood each other implicitly. In that sense, despite Aemond pleading for Vhagar to stop, he is still responsible for her actions. He's underestimated how much his emotions are feeding into his dragon and acted incredibly recklessly, urging Vhagar to hunt and get revenge on Luke. It's like he loaded a gun, pointed at Luke's head, and then his fingers slipped and accidentally blew the boy's brains out. Aemond created this incredibly dangerous situation with a dragon he struggles to control, and for that, Luke's death is ultimately his fault. Had he been satisfied with stunting on Luke in Lord Borros's hall and calling him names and flying home, Luke would still be alive. So, boo this man, boo! Through negligence and reckless behavior, Aemond is the most responsible, even if it is Vhagar who actually attacked and killed the prince and dragonling. Case closed. So that's the end of the video, right? Sort of. I'll be doing a follow-up stream after the release of this video where we will rank the dragon riders in a tier list about how strong their dragon bond is. I think that pulling apart this vital scene is very important for understanding Aemond and his character going forwards. The dragon bond and what it can do and its limits are likely to be extremely important in the upcoming War of Dancing Dragons. So spoiler alert, they will be fighting. Dany didn't have to hatch dragons and have it be a miracle because generations later they were still around. The bodies are gonna hit the floor. Also, in a future video, I'll be examining the nature of the dragon bond itself. Like, where does it come from? How does it work? And can anyone do it? Or is it just the Targaryens that are special? In that video, I'll be looking at it from the perspective of the most interesting and mysterious dragon of them all, the wild dragon, the cannibal. So look out for that. I hope you enjoyed this random deep dive into the meaning of the word Dracarys, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll talk about how the Blackwood and Strong sigils changing our crime against humanity. I will use that stupid fist logo over my dead body. That is the real problem, not a seahorse that doesn't look slightly right, you slack-jawed goons. Oh god, I need to end this video.